Hello, hello. I am thrilled to welcome all of you to a very special evening with the award-winning author Nico Lang and Mata, who is featured in Nico's national bestseller, American Teenager: How Trans Kids Are Surviving Hate and Finding Joy in a Turbulent Era. Some business items. My name is Anna. I use she, her pronouns, and I am Family Equality's Associate Director of Archives, Storytelling, and Brand. I will be facilitating tonight's discussion. And before we properly get started, I do want to just acknowledge the calendar day that this event falls on. Um, Today
It's Day of
marks
Visibility.
Today marks Transgender Day of Visibility. Mara got it. It is a day to celebrate the joy and resilience of the many diverse and powerful trans and non-binary people in our lives, our families, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, our schools, our world. Um, from the Black and brown trans women who shaped the equality movement to the many amazing trans youth that were featured in American Teenager, trans people are creating concrete change every day by just being who they are without apology. And I think that that is well worth celebrating. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that this is just the start of where advocacy begins, right? It's visibility is step one. The past few months alone have brought a lot of heartbreaking attacks on the rights of trans folks. And so today is also a day to not only loudly and proudly celebrate our trans siblings, but to share their stories and fight disinformation and discrimination and the hate that's impacting our community, which is what
Hmm.
tonight is all about, right? That is
Yeah.
a fitting way to honor today, to be in community with you two and everyone who's tuning in to discuss this work. Um, so, a little bit about the work. Why are we here? What are we talking about? American Teenager is an amazing book that puts a spotlight on those who are at the heart of the trans debate, the transgender and gender nonconforming kids themselves. For their groundbreaking new book, journalist Nico Lang spent a year traveling the country to document the lives of transgender, non-binary, and gender fluid teens and their families, drawing on hundreds of hours of on-the-ground interviews. And with them and the people in their communities, the American Teenager paints a vivid portrait of what it's like to actually grow up trans today. From the tip of Florida's conservative panhandle to vibrant queer communities in California, from Texas churches to mosques in Illinois, American Teenager gives readers a window into the lives of eight teens who, despite what some lawmakers might want us to believe, are truly just kids looking for a brighter future. And tonight we're joined by two very special guests who are central to this impactful book. We have Nico Lang here with us, a non-binary award-winning journalist with over a decade of experience covering the transgender community's fight for equality. Their work has appeared everywhere, including the Rolling Stone, Esquire, the New York Times, Vox, Wall Street Journal. The list goes on and on and on. Nico is the creator of Queer News Daily, and previously served as the deputy editor for Out Magazine, the news editor for them, the LGBTQ plus correspondent for Vice, and the editor and co-founder of the literary journal In Our Words. Their industry-leading contributions to queer media have resulted in, get ready, this is an award list, a GLAAD Media Award, 10 awards from the National Association of LGBTQ Journalists, and three awards from the Los Angeles Press Club, including 2023 Online Journalist of the Year. Nico is also the first ever recipient of the Visibility Award from the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, an honor created to recognize their impactful contributions to reporting on the lives of LGBTQ plus people. Nico, you survived that list of accolades. What an amazing list it is. And joining Nico is Mata, one of the fierce and loving parents of a youth featured in the book. I feel
Thank
starstruck
you.
to be here with her. So, welcome.
Thank you.
I am so happy to start off this discussion by with a pun. we should perhaps start on the same page, literally.
Mhm.
Nico, would you like to kick things off with a reading?
Sure. I guess since Mara's here, I should probably read part of your chapter. Let me
Okay.
let me decide. I feel like, right, we've got to. Mm,
Yeah.
Okay, one second. I'm flipping. I probably should have bookmarked it already, but oops.
It's all good.
Mm, I'm just gonna watch me flip through this book, which is fascinating.
Yeah, if you hold it up, then we can
It
all see the
is.
cover while you
Oh
flip.
yeah,
It's like a
right.
commercial. There we go.
Yeah. Um, all right. I'm trying to find a good. I believe in excerpting, because sometimes people will just read like an entire chapter, and it's like, girl, no one wants to hear all that. Feel like we should play the Jeopardy music or something.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
Yeah, we're really slaying. Yeah.
While they look for a passage, folks who are attending, if you can access the chat, which I think you can, let us know where you're tuning in from, perhaps.
Oh, I did
An
figure.
activity. All right, there we go.
Sorry, I cut short your activity. Okay, this I think is a really good introduction to Mara and Ridian, who is her son, who's sort of the lead character in the chapter. Because for each chapter, I spent 2.5 weeks with each family, and it's divided into 4 sections. And in the third section, it's actually Mara's section, because 3 of the sections are devoted to the kids themselves, sort of centering their like voices and perspectives. But then, from one section, I wanted to give voice to the parents to, talk about their own perspectives and also just, what it's been like to go on this journey with their kiddo. And this is from Mara's section. The first time I ever spoke to Mara and Ridian was over the phone in March 2022 when I was on assignment for Rolling Stone reporting on Alabama's then proposed transgender youth medical care ban. At the time, Mara was so concerned about what would happen about what would happen to her family if the law were passed that she and Ridian used pseudonyms in the article, Sophia and Oro, the latter the Spanish word for gold. While she still deals with many of those same anxieties, she can't deny what a difference being able to socially and medically transition has made in her son's life. He's no longer the pensive, withdrawn kid who hid inside his hoodie and wouldn't say hello or make eye contact when he walked into a room. He's charismatic, likable, and funny, although Mara remarks that he has developed a bit of a smart mouth. Later in the week, he will demonstrate the serrated edges of his personality at the Whataburger drive-thru, playfully teasing his father as Tom stares blankly at the fast food chain's intercom. As the seconds pass by in silence, Ridian asks from the back seat with a cheerfully insolent grin across his face, "So, are you going to get me anything?" Others have also seen a dramatic shift in Ridian since his transition, now that he has been able to show the world who he really is. A few days after my walk with Mara, I play Candyland in Mima's dining room with Ridian's preteen neighbor, Juliana, who makes good on her promise to dominate the confection themed board game, winning 3 times in a row. Juliana said that Ridian came out to her as transgender when she was 9. They were drawing with chalk outside in the driveway, and Ridian sketched a penguin in the colors of the transgender pride flag. Unaware of the symbol's meaning, she asked him what the design represented, and she says the answer was easy for her to accept. "I was taught that people are the way they are, and that's it," she recalls as she confidently moves her piece, a red plastic man with a cryogenically frozen smile, across the board. "If it doesn't affect you, then mind your business." Juliana describes Ridian effusively as the coolest person she knows, painting him as a mythic being who, quote unquote, walks on clouds. "Everything is bad down here, and then he's up there, just doing his own thing," she says. As someone who is still figuring out who she wants to be, she has gained a lot of insight from observing the way that Ridian pulls focus in a room, how everyone's eyes are just naturally drawn toward him. She says that it taught her to stick up for herself, to walk with her head held high. He stands up straight, and he walks with ease. He doesn't walk like he's in a hurry. He doesn't walk slow, though. He walks where it's apparent that he isn't lost, and he knows where he's going. Of Ridian's immediate family members, Tom was the first to accept his son's transition. Although, being a man of few words, it's tough for him to say why he didn't have the early struggles that Mara did. He compares his son's coming out to acquiring a new language. It requires translating from what you understand into an entirely new lexicon. Adults who are first learning English, he says, might speak with a strong accent or misspeak certain words because they are filtering them through the language they've known their entire lives. And when it comes to respecting his son's sense of self, Tom says that he still finds himself translating before he speaks, even today. It wasn't easy, he says, watching Juliana take no prisoners from the comfort of Mima's couch. You have to reprogram. At that point, it was 16 years of programming my brain that I had a daughter. I have to reprogram that to a son, change names and genders. It takes a minute, but the way I see it, I love my son. If he wants me to call him alien from the galaxy of whatever, that's what I'm going to call him. I need to force myself to relearn. Mara believes it's important to tell their family stories, or to tell their family story, because other parents need to know that they too can become better advocates for their children, she says. Even if they don't get it right away, they can learn. It would be tempting to say that the Gonzalez Herreros have grown closer because, I'm going to actually stop there because then we get into a whole different thing. And that's a really nice note to end on. They're close and they love each other. Isn't that great?
That
Thank
is
you.
perfect. Thank you. And like an appropriate passage too, because now we have the background for Mada's story, which I think will feed into some of the questions that will come up. Um, so let's see. I have to say, I had the pleasure of reading this book over the past several weeks. I'm really excited to chat with you, and everyone who's listening has the opportunity to pop questions in too. So feel free to use the Q&A feature to do that. But I can get us started with, I think, at the very beginning, like let's just start where it makes the most sense. Nico, you traveled across the country for this. You had what I would imagine is many family dinners and what I read to be quite a lot of movie marathons involved in writing this book. What inspired you to write it? And Mata, the same question to you. What inspired you to get involved?
Yeah, I think for
Nico?
me, uh, somewhat selfishly, I kind of had no choice but to write a book like this because, I've been doing I've been doing journalism for a really long time. I'm a longtime LGBTQ plus reporter. You were forced to listen to all my credits. I'm so sorry. But the opportunities for people like myself in journalism are dwindling because there are fewer opportunities for reporters at all, and particularly for queer reporters doing the kind of work that I do. It's just there's not a lot of ways to do it anymore. And around, gosh, 2022, I sort of hit like a fork in the road of realizing that I would need to do my work and advocacy for this community differently. And at first, my idea wasn't to write this book. I was going to quit journalism and become a lawyer because, I have a good brain for that sort of thing. And I thought, it's just the difference between writing a story and filing a legal brief, right? You're fighting for people just in different ways. But I quit my life and I went to rural Canada for 3 months, which is where my family lives up there. And I was studying for the LSATs, and I must confess that I absolutely hated it. I was having a truly miserable time. And, I was having all these, like, I was interviewing all these lawyers to like talk to them about it. And like it just gave me like the increasing perception that I did not want to be a lawyer and that I had made a huge mistake. And I was sort of in the how do you say it? I was desperate for advice at the time, absolutely desperate, so desperate that I went to a town psychic in rural Canada. I paid him $60 for his time, $60 I will never get back. And I went in and I just put all my cards on the table. And I was like, okay, well, I feel like, I'm studying for the LSATs right now, but I'm just having a really bad time. Like, Radiohead had recently re-released Kid A, which is like maybe their best album. And I was having such a better time listening to Radiohead than I was thinking about going to law school. So I just felt like that was kind of a sign. And I was like, well, if I didn't do that, there's this book that I've always wanted to write. And I told him what the book would be. And I was like, what should I do? And he's like, okay, well, let's consult the cards. And he consults the cards. And then, sorry, I just ate sushi right before this. Bad idea. He consults the cards. And then after that, he says, you should go to law school. And yeah. So the guy, I should have red flag because I was really like pointing him toward, like nudging him toward writing the book really hard, like giving him lots of like winks, like I could go to law school, but I could do this. And I should have known what I would get from it because when I walked in, he was wearing a Hollister t-shirt and had one of those like shell necklaces on. So like when he gave me that advice to go to law school, it was really cold in Canada that day because it's always cold in Canada. And I walk outside and I throw my scarf like over my shoulder really dramatically. And I said, I'm not going to let a man in a Hollister t-shirt tell me what to do. So I wrote the book instead. And really, the reason that I wanted to do this was to continue the kind of reporting that I've always done and to find a new way to do it. But also, I think tell trans stories and the stories of trans kids with a kind of depth that I felt like is really lacking in journalism and that even I haven't really gotten to express in my stories. I was just talking about this earlier, and there was this time once that I was interviewing a trans football player in South Dakota. And I don't know how it came up, but we found out that we like the same random shoegaze band, which is called Slowdive. They're amazing. And I'd never met someone casually who likes Slowdive before. So I like flipped out in a good way. And we just like talked for 20 minutes about Slowdive. And, at the end of it, it just really killed me that that couldn't be the article, that it couldn't be trans boy in South Dakota likes Slowdive. It had to be like trans boy fights discrimination because that's sort of like the bind that we like force these kids into in order to tell their stories.
Mhm.
It's got to be about the sad, horrible thing that's going on. It can't just be them living their lives. And I do think you get a little bit of the backdrop of discrimination against trans kids in the book. But for the most part, like it's really just me following these kids around, observing how they live their daily lives, showing them for who they truly are from like a holistic perspective. All of the parts that I feel like I really haven't gotten to see reflected in anyone's work, even in my own. Like I always try to provide little glimmers of that. And to show, that these trans kids are more than just being trans and they're more just than just these like bad things going on. But I just felt like we need more. Like I just felt like our political environment and our media coverage just required a certain like moral intervention, which is really what this book was. It was just a chance to like let these kids be seen for who they really are and to give readers who don't know trans kids or don't have someone like Ridian in their life a chance to like get to know these stories, to get to see these families for just like normal people, just like they are, just having like average human experiences. Some people on Goodreads have commented that they found the book boring, and it's like, good. That's great, actually, because sometimes trans kids are boring. And I want to create more space in the canon for boring trans kids. Because I mean, they're exciting and lovely and funny and like all these things, but they're just people just like the rest of us. And I just feel like we never get to talk about that and they never get to show us that. So just having like 244 pages of trans kids being boring, that was a mitzvah for me.
Well, what I have to say, when Nico came over and asked, they were like, "Look, would you like to tell your story?" And I said, "Of course, I would love to," because are always like defending themselves. Trans kids are always defending themselves and explaining people the same thing over and over and over. That when Nico presented this, I said, like, this is great because people can see we're regular people. It's not the mom of a trans kid. It's not uh Radiant is the trans kid. Like Radiant is Radiant. I mean, and they can see that we can be happy and we can stand by them and be the mom that I want to be to him. So yeah, that's that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that really came across in the book. I think it was in the introduction, Nico, you say, you mentioned that mainstream narrative has painted queer stories as like very doomed. And then queer spaces have met that with like a lot of celebration and joy and happiness. But reality is that life is nuanced and you have a good day and you have a bad day. And I think that this book really captured the fact that it's not always the worst day of your life and it's not always the best day of your life. You can, be boring, like you said. Yeah.
Sometimes it can be both, though. I like one of the
Yeah.
things I like about this book is I feel like you, as a reader, are constantly experiencing two emotions at once. And I feel like,
Mhm.
especially in 2025, that's the experience of being a queer person, is experiencing two emotions at once. And I
Yeah.
feel like I learned so much about like trauma and joy. This sounds like a non sequitur, but I swear there's a point. In 2016, because my mom suddenly died. She had a brain aneurysm, just out of nowhere. And then she went into coma. And then a week later, she died. And it was horrible. It's like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But, my husband flew to Cincinnati, which is where I'm from, to be with me. And my best friend came and spent the week with me too. So I got to be with my two favorite people like in the world, just having this like uninterrupted personal time, just doing whatever. Like we went to my favorite ice cream parlor in Cincinnati, which is Grater's. Get the raspberry chocolate chip if you ever can. It's the best ice cream in the whole world. We went to like the amusement park that basically raised me. We saw this weird movie where Kevin Spacey, pre getting canceled, played a cat. It was very strange. But it was just so fun to be with these two people that I love so much, like my two favorite people in the world. And I tell you, like, I had a wonderful week. Like, it was like out of nowhere, this unexpectedly great week. And it's like, yeah, of course it was. Like, I never get like that kind of time with them to just like do nothing and just like be a person. And it taught me so much about like trauma and joy that we feel it feels like, or we paint it as you experience one or the other. But sometimes you're experiencing both at the same time. Sometimes you need joy to get you through trauma. So to me, it's like the title of the book, I didn't write it. It was like that was like my editor's suggestion. But I wanted these things to not be seen as binary, but to be seen as kind of informing each other. And also, in conversation with all these other like emotions that trans people and queer people experience. I would love a book about trans boredom. I would love a book about trans antipathy. We don't make enough space for trans antipathy. Where's that book?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to write that one, right? Come on.
Yeah.
You've got a
Unfortunately,
trilogy.
that's not on the list. I've got a sort of like running list of the next books. Not
Oh,
quite, but maybe one day.
maybe one day. I love that. Well, Mara, I wonder about your perspective on being able to hold both things at once. There's a part of the book where a young person says, I feel like my teen years have been stolen. Even if I have good memories, it's
Yes.
always like, this is the year the bathroom bill was introduced, not the year we went to Disney. I wonder, as a parent, how do you balance that? How do you help your child hold on to their childhood, to hold on to that joy amidst the trauma?
Well, reading, we what we worked is like relive his youth and as a boy. So what we did a sensory room. He called it his sensory room. And what it was, it had Hot Wheels and all boy toys and a place where he could feel safe and he could do the things he wants to do, um, like that he missed during his growing up. And that really helped him build the person that he is today. And he was like, Mom, I just want to be myself. And like Nico said earlier, he is very confident now and really relived his youth by being a boy. He never played with girl stuff or anything. He was always playing with his brother toys, and like he had his fidgets. And Nico interviewed him in the room where we're talking about, and just finding, as a parent, just finding places or things that would reassure and make a child feel better so that they can grow and thrive. So that's really what we did. Not that it will work with every parent, but just find out what makes them happy and just touch that. And that way they can flourish, you know?
I really loved that the Hot Wheels and the sensory room. It felt like here's I'm we're gonna give you another childhood. You know, like here it's not lost.
Yeah,
What is in the past isn't just in the past. That was really powerful.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as a family organization, this book. What I appreciate is that it's not just a portrait of eight teens, it's a portrait really of eight families. And you highlight multiple generations and how everyone came together, whether their journey was simple and easy or long and winding, to support the trans young person in their lives. Nico, I'm curious if that was a part of the pitch from the get-go, or like what inspired you to write from that full family perspective?
Yeah, I always knew that the parents were going to play a really key role in the book because, the book was written for trans kids, right? It was written so that trans kids could see themselves represented in a way that wouldn't be extremely dysphoric for them, right? Because sometimes if you see this really bad representation of trans kids in the media, it can kind of cause you to spiral a little bit, because it just feels like this weird out of body experience when you're represented in a way that doesn't reflect your community well. So I just wanted something that trans kids could look to and they're say like, oh, somebody got it. That's me or that's my friend that I know. That felt really important to me. But the fact is that I know kids, I spent a lot of time with eight kids in this book. They're not going to read this. Some of the kids in the book didn't read this. There is no way Kylie, the last girl in the book, there is a 0% chance she has read this book. I would literally, I would eat this vitamin water bottle if she has read this book. And that's not to drag her. It's that, she's a teenage girl. Of course, she isn't sitting around down to read a searing documentary about, trauma, right? That's just not going to happen. So it's going to be parents that read the book. And for parents that do pick it up, I wanted it to feel like not a guidebook because I just don't feel myself like qualified to do that. I'm a very stay in my own lane kind of person. For me, I wanted them to know that they could go on the journey. I wanted them to know that it was possible for them, that if they're at the beginning of this journey with their kids and they're sort of just scared, they're like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, it just feels like so much pressure because, I feel like we put so much pressure on parents and parents end up putting so much pressure on themselves because they want to do everything right and they want to be perfect and you want to be perfect for your kids. So when you get anything wrong, you really beat yourself up, right? So for those
Yes.
parents who are just worried about making all the right decisions or doing everything correctly, I just wanted them to show them it's possible. Like you look at somebody like Marta or you look at Susan Wyatt's mom, when she started out doing
Mhm.
this, she wasn't an expert on trans youth. She'd never really even heard the word transgender before. She didn't really know that you could be trans. And now she runs a statewide support group for trans youth, right? So you see the strides that people can make. You see the ways that people become those like experts and advocates. And then they become those people for other people so they can be this sort of like parent that they maybe needed at the beginning of this. So, for parents to read this book, I just want to send that message of hope that like as Mara said, I think really beautifully, you can learn. Like all of us can learn. Like I feel like I'm still learning all the time and these kids are teaching me so much. I just think that we've all
Yes.
got to listen because you can't learn if you can't listen. But for in terms of centering the kids' voices, it was really important for me to do that because I feel like so often it's the parents that have to speak for their children because they're worried about their safety. They're worried about like what happens if their kids are too much out there. And I get that. That's probably the same decision I would make if I had children. Luckily, I don't. No one wants to trust me with their children. Um, but I
Hmm.
understand it and I validate it. The issue is that then so often we don't hear from kids themselves. We don't get to know them. We don't get to like see things from their own perspective. We don't get to learn about like the beautiful things, but the totally mundane things, right? And with that, it allows the far right to fill in that information vacuum, as I say in the book, with all of this misinformation about kids. They can say things like, oh, it's the parents who are doing this. They're making their kids trans,
Yeah.
which is insane because I helped raise my younger brothers, and I got to say, I couldn't even get them to do their homework. I can't change their gender. That's not going to work. But like, I don't think you really come to understand how silly that is unless you spend time with these kids, unless you hear from them. Because, when you read any page of this book, you can go, oh, it's not anyone that's like forcing this. It's just that this is the kid being themselves, right? You can see just how
Yes.
like a non-issue this is, what a not big deal this is. And you get that when you're able to hear from the kids themselves. So I felt like it was just, to me, it was about balancing those perspectives of the outside perspective from the families, but then, allowing kids to really have the agency here and to feel like they are very much the main characters in their own stories.
Yes.
I think that was really clear throughout the book. I really loved those moments where it felt like the youth were like, "Stop asking me these questions. Like, it doesn't matter. Let's move. I want to show you something actually cool here,"
Yeah.
which rings true to every time I've ever talked to a young person. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
Kylie, whenever I would ask her literally like any question, she would just like roll her eyes at me and be like,
yep.
ah, whatever. Now, if we just talked about like K-pop or something, that she would be happy to discuss.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Well, you teed up the next question I have very well. Mata, in the passage that Nico read, they included that, I want to tell my story so that other parents can know um, that it's okay to want to become better advocates. I'm curious what advice you have for those parents of trans kids who want to become better advocates.
Okay. First of all, you have to accept the truth, accept the fact that this is what's happening and that you have to be there for your child. I mean, there's no other way. You have to actually support them and know what, know your child, get to know them because it's not easy for them and they're tired of explaining the same thing over and over again to everybody. Just listen and be there if they're sad, if they're happy, just be there. That's love is everything. I mean, you have at the beginning it was really hard for me because it's something different and it was going to be a harder life for him. And that's what breaks my heart every day when people like what's going on don't understand. But I will tell the other parents just be there for your kid and try to learn, get as much information as you can. Read this book, please. Read the book. It will explain a lot of things that it's not only like only surgeries or beta blockers or all the process. It's about them. It's about them and the love they can have and to understand them. Each one is different. And we have to learn that they're just kids being kids. So that's what I think.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Well, to that end, I wonder, one of the things I kept noticing throughout the book was the ways that these kids are really teaching, just by living their lives, really teaching the
Mhm.
people who are older than them how to also live authentically. Nico, you tell a story of a family whose child's authenticity inspires their parent to come out.
Yeah.
I think that intergenerational ripple effect is really beautiful. And so I'm curious with the two of you, what's Nico, what's one thing that you learned about yourself while interviewing all of these young people? And then Mata, what's one thing that you've learned from your child as you've been on this journey?
Okay.
Okay, Mara, you're gonna have to go first on this one. I'm gonna have to think about.
Oh, okay. I learned that people can be cruel, and but I've learned that there's a solution for every problem. Like he has taught me, like he still teaches me every day patience, how to be a good person. Like he is very humble, down to earth, and it's like, Mom, don't worry, I stress a lot. Like when he was transitioning, that you could tell that he was still feminine looking, and people would stare, but he had green hair, so people, I mean, looked at him like an alien. And I would always tell him, I want to rip this person's head off. So at the same time, he was like so cool about it. He's like, Mom, don't sweat it. So I learned how to be patient and not to care about the bad things and focus on the good things, teaching people about it. If anybody has a question, I would tell them, please ask me. I'll help you, guide you, if, understand, so that we could spread the love and the word, and they people can understand. I bet a lot of people have never met a trans person ever before. I hadn't, so I had to learn what his needs were and what made him better. So yeah, I mean, it has been a ride, and I have learned so much, and I learn every day more and more from him. He's a wonderful person.
I
Nico?
will say, I will say I learned a lot of slang from this. I now talk like a 19-year-old, and I don't know how to
Yes.
stop doing it. Like I wish like these words will just like slip out of my mouth, and I'm like, stop talking like this. You were 37 years old, but I don't know how to just like rewind. But so there's that. But I think they've taught me just a lot about patience. Like being around kids,
Patience.
you learn a lot of patience. And this is definitely, I'm a Buddhist and I've definitely been to like level up. I've leveled up several levels in Buddhism because of this. I think I'm like I know it's not like this, but I feel like a 13 level Buddhist now. Like I'm doing great. And one of the girls in the book, Ruby actually said something that I think about a lot. I didn't put it in the book because I didn't want to make it seem like I was like advocating smoking. But there was this time where she does this thing where if there's something that other people perceive to be a big deal, but that she knows isn't actually really a big deal, she quotes Basic Instinct, and she'll like she has this like fake cigarette that she pantomimes, and she'll go like this and she'll say, "What are they gonna do? Arrest me for smoking?" And I think of that literally all the time. Like, I was on the way to the airport this morning. I was like concerned about missing my flight. And I was like, I literally thought in my head, what are they going to do? Arrest me for smoking? Because it's like, there are going to be more flights. If I miss this one,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just get the next one. And I sort of remind
Yep.
myself this all the time like, oh, if I'm late to this thing, what are they going to do? Arrest me? What's really the worst that can happen? And it sort of reminded me like that most of the things that we perceive to be like a problem or a big deal in our lives aren't really a big deal. And I think also knowing everything that these kids are going through right now, and how hard they are fighting to just like be alive and to be like a human person in America, it really gives you a perspective that like most of your problems are actually like quite small. I just had to like file my taxes and it was like bigger than I wanted, like in the bad way, right? It was like a scary number that I have to like get back, and I was like, it'll be fine. Most things are fine. I'm not fleeing the country right now, so I'm doing pretty good. But yeah, these kids.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like this is such a cliche, but I genuinely feel like I've become a better, more loving person by knowing them. And I now have all of these families across the country in like 7 different states. Like before writing this book, I never
Mhm.
felt like I had enough family to go around. And now it's like, not to put you on the spot, but Mara's always texting me to be like, have you eaten? How are you doing? And I'm like, yes, I've eaten. I ate. And it's like so nice because it's like she like pesters me in that way that like moms pester you, you know? And it's just really lovely to have. Like I never,
Oh,
I have a really small family already anyway. And with my mom gone, it just never feels like I have enough. And now I have like so much family, more family than I know what to do with. If any of you need some extra family, I have a couple families I can donate you, you know? Mara would be happy to bug you about your eating habits.
oh
I'm just
no.
teasing you. Don't stop. I genuinely love it. I think it's very sweet.
I just want them to feel comfortable when they were here, and I kept on asking them what they would like to eat, and it was like a nightmare.
She was definitely
But at the
keeping
same
like a
time,
diary of my like food, I think.
As it should
but we did
be.
great.
That's mama bear energy. We need
Yeah,
more mama bear energy in this world. I think we'd be better off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote it in the book. When she picked me up from the airport, she showed up with antihistamine tablets, water, and an entire gluten-free cake.
That's amazing. Best Uber you'll ever get.
No, 5 stars. Jeez.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. I am looking, we're getting a few questions in. So people
Okay.
please keep adding questions into the Q&A. We have a question for Mata. What surprised you most about sharing your family story for this brilliant book?
What surprised me the most?
Yes.
Um, I think the welcome that a lot of people have had, they it's special to a lot of people, and it has touched a lot of people. Like when we went to book events and things like that, like how how nice it feels that we touch somebody's life. If we touch one life, that's enough. I mean, that's great. If we touch 1,000 lives, even better, of course. But how people have really, really um, liked it, and how it has educated them, or how they identify with this book. It has been a ride and a show of love, a lot of love from people that have really identified with the book.
I think I'm sure that it might have felt scary when this book was coming out and your name is going to be
Oh,
everywhere.
yeah.
So to be received with that kind of
Hmm.
love is really special and a testament to, I think,
Yes.
the community of people who are reading this book. Yeah, that's really wonderful.
Yes.
Nico,
Yes, but
oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
it like you said, it can be scary. Like we had to put cameras in our house. We live in Alabama. So a lot of people don't understand it, but I think if the word gets out more and people get to meet trans kids as they are, they're gonna see we're not evil. We're not doing anything bad. At the end of the day, it's who we love and what I want to look like. What does it matter if we're not harming anybody? And I want people to understand this. But yeah, it's scary and some situations, and how people would follow you and like look at you weird, or stare at you, or not even want to be around you if you're in a cash register and they see you. Some people have gone by and changed cash registers because we are at one. So things like that, it can be scary, but at the same time, we have touched so many lives that I am so glad, Nico. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for doing it with me.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we say a lot at Family Equality is, I think it's a Katie Couric quote, so I'm always accidentally quoting her, but we say it's hard to hate up close, right? Like the minute you actually hear someone's
Mhm.
story everything changes. So doing this kind of work, just sharing your story in this way, you said even if we change one person's mind, it makes a difference. But I promise you've changed more than one person's mind. You've really made quite a big difference.
Yes.
So thank you
Thank
for
you.
doing that scary
Thank
thing.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, Nika, we have a question from the audience. Were there any stories or subjects that you found especially challenging to capture or include? And how did you navigate those moments with sensitivity?
Oh gosh. I think all of them were challenging in different ways. It was like a capstone project for me of journalism, where you feel like not only was I putting into use or putting to use every skill I've ever learned in my entire career. And doing it on the spot and often, at like a moment's notice. But I was learning and developing new skills that I didn't know that I had or like could develop. And then through releasing this book, it's been even more skills that I've had to develop, like public speaking. I used to be utterly terrified of the idea of talking to anybody in a public forum. Look at me now. Look at all these words I'm stringing together, right? So it's been a consistent challenge. It's been tough. I don't want to, like, woe is me, but like, it's definitely been a lot. But I think the family that I had, not like the hardest time with, but that took the most amount of, like, the greatest amount of sensitivity is Jack and Augie's family in Florida. When I went down there, to spend that 2.5 weeks with them, their trauma was still really, really, really fresh because they had just recently been homeless. They were unhoused for a period of like 3 months, and they had just gotten into an accommodation a few days before they'd finally gotten an apartment. And you could just feel it sitting there with them. You could feel that this family had really, really been through something. And particularly Jack, because, we talk about this in the book, but she was detransitioned by the state of Florida. She lost her gender affirming medical care for 5 months, under the state's Medicaid ban. And it was just a tremendously difficult time for like the whole family because Jack, she didn't want anyone to see her like that. So she just stopped leaving her room, and she didn't want to see herself either. So she would just sit in the dark every day, and she stopped eating because she was so depressed. So her mom, who we call June in the book, would sit beside her every night as she fell asleep in case her daughter's heart stopped in her sleep. So, navigating all of that fresh trauma with them, I didn't know if I could do it at first. Like I didn't know if I was equipped or if they were even in the place for it. Like Jack, the first night that we all had dinner, I'd just gotten there from the airport. She just looked so hollow. Like I looked at her across from me at the table, and she just looked barely there. And, we'd talked over the phone before that, and I just thought that she was really shy. And she just seemed like a really shy kid. But then I think I understood so much more about what she went through and how much this was really, really, really affecting her. But I feel lucky that we were able to just get through it. The three of us or the four of us. And I think part of it was that being in that space and getting to talk about the stuff that they'd all been through was actually really helpful because Jack had experienced so much trauma in a short amount of time. She wasn't in therapy or anything like that. Her family wouldn't have had the money, so she just hadn't gotten to talk about it with anyone. So talking about it with me, because I think what people don't understand is I tried to like kind of hint a little bit at this in the book, but we were doing in-depth therapy essentially, like every single day. Like Mara and I, or Ridian and I, or Jack and I would sit down for like an hour and a half, and we're talking about everything. We're talking the good things, the bad things, the in-between things. So I'm getting, this person's pretty much entire life story over like 2.5 weeks. Like you're really talking about a lot, and you're doing this like emotionally intense work day after day after day. It's a lot to unpack. So that was helpful for her because she got to kind of unburden herself. She got to work through a lot of her emotions. And it kind of like there was this day that she actually had a really hard time because she had this sort of almost like PTSD reaction where she just like kept shaking. and she just had to like stay in her room all day like drinking tea, but it was just because her body was finally allowing her to process all of this stuff. So I don't know if there was anything I did necessarily, some way in which like I was extra good or extra sensitive, except that I think it just showed how good it can be to talk about things. It showed me like the kind of work that I do, like it can be a gift to people, who really need this and really need someone to process it with, because you don't always just have somebody in your daily life you can talk about this stuff with. It's really hard to just like casually bring up, especially with people who love you or people who have been through it too, because they can't process your trauma because they're processing their own trauma. So I'm just really glad that I got to help them do that. Like Jack is in a really, really good place now. She moved out of Florida. She moved in with her boyfriend. It seems like things are going well. He likes David Lynch movies, so like he seems like good people, and she has a job that she doesn't like, but she's got one, and she's thinking about going back to school. And that just makes me so
That's
happy
cool.
because I didn't think that would ever be the case for her. Like I would sometimes ask her about the future, like, what are you planning for yourself? Because she's so smart and interesting and cool. And I just feel like if she ever wrote a book, it'd be so great. Like, screw this book. That's the book I want to read? So I was kind of like her, like Yenta a little bit, and I was just always like nudging her, being like, "What are you gonna do? What's the plan?" And she wouldn't talk about it. It really broke my heart to hear it because she would say that too much optimism had plagued her life and that she just didn't want to think about the future. And just hearing this girl, like this 17-year-old girl who doesn't want to think about the future, that's horrible. That's a horrible thing. So I'm really glad that she's in this place where she's making plans for the future, and she just seems really happy and ebullient in a way that she wasn't before. But I also know how hard it took or how hard it was for her to get there. And I just know it shouldn't be this hard. Like not every family is going to have a journalist come stay with them 2.5 weeks to process their trauma. So
But that is something that I really noticed, and like part of what I do at Family Equality is, storytelling, it's advocacy. We just talked about how you can change people's minds if you share your story, but what I really got from the book was just how healing it was to share your story with one other person who will listen. Like the space that you gave these families to just talk about who they are and where they've been and reflect on that. It seemed like it was a really impactful space for them to share. So I'm glad that you brought that up because that was something that was on my mind through as I was reading it. Just the power of hearing one person's story over the course of an hour and 30 minutes. Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like having like a live-in social worker.
yeah, truly, yeah.
Yeah, they were.
You can attest, right, Mara? Yeah.
Yes, it's easy to talk to Nico.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. We have one more question, and then we can close things out. Mata from
Mhm.
Christy, how did you
Okay.
handle friends and family who didn't accept or don't accept the transgender community? Um, and people who love you but are like, isn't this just a phase? That kind of
Yeah, that's the
rhetoric.
first thing that people say. That's the first thing people say. It's just a phase, or you're a bad parent because you're allowing this to happen. Um, I have a very close person in my family that thinks different from what I think and doesn't support us and it hurts me every single day. But I've learned that everybody thinks their own way. And, you got to respect people for what they are. But to give you an example, this person talked about the bathroom bill, right, Nico?
Yeah, I
And
know. We're both reliving some trauma right now.
and we really the people don't understand that you're just trans people are just gonna go use the restroom, that it's not something, that they're not criminals, that they're not there to do something, harm you or do anything bad. You just want to go to a restroom. An example is Radian. He had a lot of of infections and things because he would hold himself from going to the restroom all day long in a school day. And, because he didn't feel right going to either or, because they would beat him up, or they would look at him strange, or they would it's horrible not having people support. But at the same time, you with this story, they have learned a lot. They have learned a lot, and they're starting to open their mind to it because they love Radiant regardless if he's trans or not, but they don't understand the concept of the way you, like, they don't believe that this is really happening. A lot of people don't believe that it's a real thing that's going on, like you're born this way, that you're not it's not a choice, like one day you say I'm trans. No, that doesn't work that way. It's a whole process, and people don't get that. So an example for Radian was that he wanted the mastectomy. And I got criticized a lot as a parent because I encouraged it, because I know how much my child was suffering because of it. So, yeah, some people don't get it, and you just have to learn how to go, like, look, you don't pay my bills. You don't do anything. So just, you know, just live on and forget about it. Did I
Forget
lose
about
you?
it. We no, we got.
Yeah.
I like the way that advice
Forget
ends.
about it. Don't
That's
sweat
it.
it. You cannot change people's minds.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but you can advocate and make them understand, and maybe they'll learn something or two,
That's it.
and they should read the book.
Yeah, maybe that's what you should say to them is read this book. There we go.
Yes.
I love that. Well, that takes us right up to the end of the hour. I am so grateful to the two of you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I think it's clear, but I hope I'll say it again. This book really means a lot to so many people. So I'm really glad that, there we go. I'm really glad that today,
It's blurry.
I know this
I
blurs.
know it's the background thing. It's this
Yeah.
filter.
Well, it's a
Okay,
really
there we
pretty
go.
cover also.
Yes, it is.
Beautiful. But today of all days, thank you for sharing your story and allowing us to sit with it. To the folks who
Thank you for
are,
having us.
yes, of course. To the folks who are listening in and watching, a little plug for you. We've talked a lot about storytelling. You can share your story with Family Equality. There's a lot of different ways, and you will get an email with all the links for different opportunities you have to share your story. We do a virtual storytelling circle that is almost like this. You share a 5-minute story and then get to reflect on it with other people, which is really lovely. So if you want to come to that, that's April 16th. And yeah, I think that closes things out. But thank you for taking the time today, Nico and Mata. This was really lovely.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story. And Nico, thank you for writing it. I'm grateful for both of you. And I hope that everyone has a great
Thank
night.
you. You
Absolutely. And if
too.
you haven't
Thank
bought
you
the book
so
yet,
much.
go buy the book.
Yes.
Yes.
We will include a link in the email that goes out in 24 hours. So, or you can
Absolutely.
just Google it and find
It's
it.
not in Amazon.
Yes.
They don't need your money.
I was
Like,
going to
just
say,
go
go to a local
anywhere.
bookstore
Go
and
to
yeah,
Anonymous.
that's the way to do it. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.